There is one person an avoidant can become deeply connected to in a way that is difficult to explain from the outside. Many people look at an avoidant's distance, silence, emotional shutdown, and guarded behavior and assume they simply don't know how to love. But that interpretation misses what is happening underneath. An avoidant may walk away from relationships, resist commitment, keep people at arm's length, or appear completely unaffected by emotional situations. Yet that does not mean they are incapable of forming a powerful attachment. In fact, when an avoidant finally allows someone to reach the part of them they usually protect, that connection can become incredibly significant. Sometimes, there is one particular person who reaches them in a way nobody else ever has. And even when circumstances change, that person can remain deeply embedded in their emotional world. In this video, Inside Avoidant will explore what it really means to become that person for an avoidant, why this type of attachment can feel so rare, what psychological patterns are behind it, and the subtle signs that reveal when a connection has gone far beyond ordinary attraction or attachment. Avoidants are not necessarily cold or emotionless. Quite often they feel far more than they know how to express. Their emotional defenses may have developed because closeness once came with disappointment, rejection, inconsistency, neglect, or the fear of being abandoned. Over time, they learn that depending on someone can hurt, so they develop another strategy: depend on yourself, suppress your needs, and never get too close. They create emotional distance because distance feels safer. They disconnect when feelings become overwhelming. They may convince themselves that relationships are unnecessary or that they are better off alone. When someone gets too close, their instinct may be to retreat rather than lean in. That is why many of their relationships never reach true emotional depth. They can spend time with someone without allowing themselves to become completely attached. They may enjoy companionship while still keeping a private emotional door locked. But this is where the contradiction begins. The person who avoids intimacy may secretly want the very thing they keep running from. Somewhere beneath the defenses is a desire to be understood without being judged, accepted without being controlled, and loved without feeling trapped. They want emotional safety, but they have difficulty trusting that safety will actually last. Then, occasionally, someone enters their life who reaches them differently. This person doesn't force closeness. They don't constantly demand reassurance. They don't chase every time the avoidant pulls away or try to tear down their defenses through pressure. Instead, they create a sense of acceptance. They allow the avoidant to be who they are, while still maintaining their own emotional stability. And something begins to shift. For the avoidant, this kind of connection can feel both frightening and strangely irresistible. They may not understand why they feel so drawn towards someone who isn't demanding anything from them. For perhaps the first time, closeness does not feel like a threat. It begins to feel possible. That is often where a deeper bond starts forming. Trust is especially important here because avoidants tend to protect it carefully. They don't necessarily give emotional access to everyone they meet. When they finally allow someone into their private emotional world, that access can carry enormous significance. And even if the relationship eventually falls apart, the emotional imprint may remain. Time can pass, circumstances can change, other people may enter their life. Yet certain memories, feelings, and associations connected to that person can remain surprisingly powerful. Avoidants may not form deep bonds easily, but when they genuinely do, the attachment can be much deeper than their outward behavior suggests. So how can you tell whether you were that person? The signs usually aren't dramatic. In fact, they are often hidden inside small behaviors that would be easy to overlook. One of the clearest signs is vulnerability. An avoidant who normally keeps everything private may suddenly reveal parts of themselves they rarely show anyone. Maybe they tell you about a fear they've carried for years. Maybe they admit something embarrassing or painful. Maybe you see them emotionally overwhelmed, broken down, uncertain, or afraid.
For someone who normally protects themselves through emotional distance, allowing another person to witness those hidden layers is significant.
It means their defense is lowered enough for you to see what they normally keep protected. Another powerful sign is that the distance never completely erases the connection. An avoidant may disappear. They may withdraw for a long period. They might stop communicating and seem as though they have completely moved forward. But sometimes, after months or even years, they find a reason to return. And when they do, the emotional familiarity can feel strangely intact. They may not communicate consistently. They may not openly admit what they feel. But their return can reveal that the connection was never completely erased from their inner world.
That doesn't automatically mean every return represents lasting love or a desire for reconciliation.
But when someone repeatedly carries a particular person emotionally, despite creating distance, it can reveal that the relationship left a deeper imprint than their silence suggested. There is another subtle difference you may notice. The avoidant behaves differently around you. Their defenses may still exist, but they aren't exactly the same. They may become softer, more playful, more honest, or unexpectedly comfortable. They may reveal personal details without realizing how significant that is. They might remember things you mentioned long ago, notice small changes in you, or hold on to memories that seem insignificant to everyone else. Sometimes their attachment appears through what they don't say. They may never openly explain how much you affected them, but you can see your influence in their behavior. Certain places remind them of you. Certain experiences bring back memories. They may compare future relationships to what they experienced with you without consciously admitting it.
For an avoidant, emotional significance isn't always expressed through grand declarations.
Sometimes it appears through memory, sometimes through unexpected vulnerability, sometimes through returning after distance, and sometimes through the fact that, despite all their attempts to detach, a particular person continues to occupy a quiet but permanent place inside them. One of the most confusing things about an avoidant attachment is how difficult it can be for them to emotionally release someone who truly reached them. From the outside, they may appear to move on faster than anyone else. They can become distant, stop communicating, start seeing someone new, and create the impression that the relationship meant very little. But outward detachment doesn't always tell the full story.
An avoidant may enter another relationship,
Build a new life, or even eventually get married, while still carrying the emotional imprint of one particular person. That connection can remain hidden beneath everything else. You may not see it in their everyday behavior, and they may rarely talk about it, but internally, the memory can continue to exist. It's almost like an emotional echo, quiet most of the time, but never completely gone. This is one reason a reunion with someone they once deeply connected with can feel surprisingly intense. Years may have passed. There may have been months or even long periods of complete silence. Yet when they encounter that person again, familiar emotions can return much faster than expected. The distance didn't necessarily erase the connection. It simply placed it somewhere they didn't have to confront every day.
While some people can experience a relationship,
Process the ending, and gradually detach from the emotional attachment, an avoidant may compartmentalize instead. They put the feelings away rather than fully working through them. They continue living their life, but the person who reached them deeply can remain part of their internal emotional landscape for a very long time. So, what actually makes someone become that unforgettable person? It isn't perfection. You don't become deeply significant to an avoidant by constantly chasing them, proving your worth, or trying to force your way through their defenses. And it certainly isn't about manipulating them with jealousy, disappearing intentionally, or playing emotional games. What creates a lasting bond is much simpler and much more powerful: emotional safety. An avoidant needs to experience a relationship where closeness doesn't automatically mean losing freedom, where vulnerability doesn't immediately turn into pressure, where needing space doesn't result in punishment or emotional retaliation.
When you respond with patience instead of panic,
They slowly learn that not every relationship requires instant emotional access. They discover that someone can care about them without demanding that they open up before they're ready. When you remain emotionally grounded, they begin to understand that intimacy doesn't necessarily create chaos. Your stability teaches their nervous system something their past may never have taught them: closeness can be calm. And when you respect their need for independence without becoming cold or abandoning your own needs, they don't have to constantly defend their autonomy. They can experience connection without feeling as though they are disappearing inside another person. There's another quality that matters just as much: authenticity. When you don't manipulate them, don't intentionally create jealousy, don't use silence as punishment, and don't turn every emotional difficulty into a power struggle, something important happens. They begin to realize they don't have to stay on guard around you. That is how trust grows.
for an avoidant,
The person who becomes deeply significant isn't necessarily the person who creates the strongest emotional highs. It isn't always the person who produces the most chemistry, drama, or intensity. In many cases, it's the person whose presence brings peace. Drama can feel familiar to someone who has learned that relationships are unpredictable. Intensity can create powerful attraction, but it can also activate their defenses. A relationship filled with emotional highs and lows may actually reinforce their belief that closeness is dangerous. Safety works differently. The person who makes an avoidant feel safe doesn't have to constantly reassure them or prove that they won't leave. They simply create an environment where connection doesn't feel like a trap. They can communicate honestly without attacking. They can give space without disappearing emotionally. They can love deeply without losing themselves.
that kind of person becomes difficult to forget because the relationship represents something the avoidant has secretly wanted but may have believed was impossible.
It feels peaceful. It feels predictable. It feels like they can finally breathe. And sometimes, that person begins to feel less like a romantic partner and more like home. But there is an important reality that cannot be ignored. Being the person an avoidant forms a powerful attachment with does not guarantee that the relationship will be easy, healthy, or permanent. A deep bond doesn't automatically remove their attachment patterns. You may still experience the push and pull. One moment they can be emotionally present, affectionate, and open, and the next they may suddenly retreat behind their walls. You may experience closeness, followed by unexplained distance. Warmth can be followed by silence. Connection can suddenly turn into uncertainty.
And that can hurt. There may be moments when you question whether they ever cared.
You may wonder why someone who seems so connected to you could suddenly behave as though they need to escape. You may even start believing that you imagined the entire connection. But the complexity of avoidant attachment is that emotional significance and emotional availability are not the same thing. Someone can care deeply and still struggle to remain emotionally consistent. Someone can miss you and still avoid contacting you. Someone can feel connected to you and still become overwhelmed by the vulnerability that connection creates. That contradiction is what makes loving an avoidant so difficult to understand. The bond may be real, but the ability to maintain closeness may fluctuate.
And if you truly became someone who reached them at a deeper level,
Your impact may remain long after the visible relationship has changed. Even when they retreat, even when they create distance, and even when they attempt to convince themselves that they are better off without the connection, the emotional imprint can remain. That is why the deepest bonds with avoidance are rarely about how intensely someone pursued them. They are about how safe they felt when they were finally allowed to be themselves. An avoidant may create distance, disappear, or convince themselves that walking away is the safest option, but emotionally, they may continue returning to the same connection again and again. Even when they don't openly acknowledge it, there can be a quiet awareness inside them that certain people are impossible to replace. That person becomes an emotional reference point, someone whose presence changed them in a way they cannot simply undo. So can an avoidant genuinely love someone for a lifetime? Yes, they can. But their version of lasting love may look very different from the kind of love most people expect to see.
They may not constantly express affection.
They may not send reassuring messages every day or openly explain everything they're feeling. They might struggle to provide the consistency and emotional availability you naturally want from a partner. But that doesn't mean there is nothing happening beneath the surface. Sometimes their feelings appear through what they do, rather than what they say. You may notice it in the loyalty they quietly maintain. You may see it in the way they remember things about you that other people would have forgotten. You may see it when they unexpectedly appear during an important moment, even after being distant for a long time. They might disappear when emotions become overwhelming, yet somehow find their way back when something genuinely matters. For an avoidant, love can exist quietly. It may not announce itself with constant words. Instead, it survives through memory, behavior, and emotional significance. They may carry certain conversations, experiences, places, jokes, or small details about you long after the relationship itself has changed. And that's what makes this kind of attachment so complicated.
You may believe that their silence means they forgot you. You may assume that their distance means they stopped caring. But emotional withdrawal and emotional erasure are not necessarily the same thing. A person can shut down contact without shutting down the emotional memory. They can create physical distance while still carrying the connection internally. They can move forward with their life while certain memories continue following them. It's almost as though an invisible line remains between two people. You may not see it, they may never talk about it, they may even try to ignore it, yet something continues connecting their present experience to what they once shared with you. Time doesn't always remove that feeling. Distance doesn't automatically destroy it. Silence doesn't necessarily make it disappear. If you were genuinely the person an avoidant formed an unusually deep attachment with, then the significance may have less to do with something you deliberately did and more to do with what they experienced when they were around you. You may have reached a part of them that they normally keep hidden. You may have made them feel accepted without demanding that they become someone else. You may have represented emotional safety during a period when closeness felt threatening. And once someone experiences that kind of connection, it can become difficult to completely forget what it felt like. They may never tell you that directly. They may never sit down and explain how deeply you affected them. They may disappear when the connection becomes too emotionally intense. They may convince themselves that separation is easier. They may bury their feelings beneath work, new relationships, distractions, or a carefully controlled life. But sometimes, what a person refuses to discuss can still have a powerful influence over them. That is why the signs of a deep, avoidant attachment can be so subtle. It's not always about dramatic declarations or constant communication.
Sometimes it's the fact that they remember, they notice, they return. They hold on to certain pieces of the relationship long after everyone else assumes they've moved on. And even when they don't physically return, the emotional imprint can remain. But remember, an invisible connection should never be confused with a promise of a healthy relationship. A deep attachment does not automatically mean someone is ready to communicate, commit, or overcome their emotional defenses. Love can exist alongside fear. Attachment can exist alongside avoidance. Someone can care deeply and still struggle to show up consistently. That is what makes avoidant love so difficult to understand.
Their heart may pull toward connection, while their defenses pull them away from it. They may want closeness and then become frightened by the vulnerability that closeness creates. They may miss someone while simultaneously avoiding contact. They may value a person enormously while still needing distance to regulate their emotions. The contradiction can be painful, but it explains why their behavior may seem so confusing. If you were someone who reached them at a level very few people ever did, your impact may not disappear simply because the relationship changed. You became part of their emotional history. You became associated with a feeling they may have spent much of their life searching for without knowing how to name it. Safety, acceptance, peace. And perhaps that is the real meaning behind being the person an avoidant never completely forgets. It isn't about having magical control over their heart.
It isn't about waiting forever for someone who refuses to meet you halfway. And it isn't about believing that every avoidant will inevitably return. It's about understanding that some connections leave an imprint far deeper than their outward behavior suggests. They may run from the relationship, they may go silent, they may build another life, but what you represented to them can remain. That quiet emotional thread may continue existing long after the visible connection has disappeared. And sometimes, the most powerful bonds aren't the ones that are constantly spoken about. They're the ones that continue to exist quietly beneath the surface, carried through memory, emotion, and the parts of a person that they rarely allow anyone else to see.